Good morning, everybody. I know it's quite a hard ask to first to be speaking on the last day because as a speaker we find that most of the topics would have been well covered, so it's a little bit of a angst for us, and as people who have come to listen, it's the third day in a stretch, so that is also going to be difficult. So I'll try to do as much justice as is possible. We are a fairly religious country here, so I think one of the good things that we should do is pause for a second and pray. And I sort of put this up to say that the feeling is in most instances that in cybersecurity we will end up patching and praying. I'll just try to share with you the story of the Himba tribe in northwest Namibia. It's around 50,000 people in a region called Queen, Kune, and what they specialize is hunting monkeys. And monkeys, as most of us know, are one of the most cleverest species. And what they do is quite simple. They take a coconut, carve out the inside, make a hole on one side, put a delicacy inside the coconut. Normally it's an orange because it's bright colored. String it and tie it to a tree. And then they wait. Slowly you see the monkey coming, and then it puts his hand inside that hole, and then it catches the orange. And then the hunter starts moving in slowly. The monkey is looking at the hunter, but he is not willing to let go of the orange. And finally, we know what happens to the monkey. The trap is not in the orange. It's in the mind of the monkey. So you call it greed, you call it, and this is something which is very typical in the world of cyber. I remember about a year back, and I was telling it to a couple of people here, that for about 2.5 months, I used to get every day in the evening around between 6:30 and 7:30 a prompt on Ashley Madison. And many a times I was tempted because, you see this again and again and again. I said, what is this? I fill my name and I don't know what, said, don't press this. And then I realized, a few days later, I said, why 6:30 to 7:30? And that's when your mind is weakest. At the end of the day, between 6:30 and 7:30 is when people say you shouldn't go for a negotiation. And I think, there are no hard and fast rules. It's all about our mind, our instinct. And I say that, which most say is it a silver bullet in cyber? None. Okay. The existential question is whether you know that you have been hacked. The point is whether you have identified it in real time, which is also not possible. Types of organizations, which most of us know. The current narrative is why I talk about the present. Before I go to the future, I just want to give you a little roundup on the present. Is complacency or complexity, which we say either I don't know, so it's not going to affect me, or I don't care. Now, I just want you to consider this. A constant, iterative, moderate attack on the critical infrastructure of a company, of a country or a company, and if we compare it with the war of attrition or the 30-year war, and if it is able to take off 1% of our GDP every year for 30 years, that is definitely a threat for a country. It can just take off our whole economy. And this is why cyber threats must be looked into without being fearful as something which is real, that it can really slowly come and take a little bit chew, and at the end you will find that we might be naked in some places. Threats of the future. So I'm just not trying to go into the technical details because this has been very well covered here, but more like a little bit of storytelling. The first one for me is the sophisticated worm. And this is one of the biggest concerns that people are saying, that these are worms that can come into your system and lie dormant. It won't move. And at a most critical point, they will act. But you will never know it's a cyber attack. You would possibly think it's a machine failure. And that is how clever this worm can be. Okay? Attacks are most attributed as machine problems or system failures. missiles and GPS. I thought this is very interesting, and I'm sure most of the people in the military know that we use GPS for most of the missiles, and the target can be locked and by means of an SMS. But the challenge is you might have a worm that can make sure that your missile can just veer away 2 seconds before it hits the target. So, as it flies, you don't see, it just goes, last second it just goes away. And this is a big threat. So this is why countries like China and Russia are now developing their own GPS systems, which I have mentioned there. Bots, okay? This is one of the biggest concerns that has been going around. Look at this, 8% of Twitter accounts are automated, 23 million active users, which means a huge threat for manipulation of information. What did spooking do? There was a news through social media that said there was an explosion in White House and the president was injured. In less than 6 minutes, Dow lost 140 points and the S&P 500 lost $136.5 million in a single day. This is what cyber can do. Encryption. So what is encryption? It's basically maths, and I'm sure lots of you know about maths. But with the speed of quantum computing, any encryption can be broken. And one of the examples that we cite is the brute force attack. IoTs. Today there was a note from a senior intelligence professional in the US saying that they will use sensors in IoTs to do surveillance. So the biggest threat of IoTs are going to be the sensors, and these sensors are ubiquitous. It is going to be there everywhere, and nobody is prepared to know what is the level of security that you put in it. What about supply chain security? This for us is a huge one. And the key question is, what happens if an Infosys, Wipro or TCS is attacked and this becomes public? I asked this question to Narayana Murthy, one of the founders, and I asked him what would happen. He says that would be the beginning of the end of Indian ICT industry. That was his answer. I said, can you come on stage and say that? He said, yes. ICS and SCADA. Now we talked about Stuxnet, but this was one called Black Energy, an older one. It's not a new one. And so, the problem is not if there is a cyber attack on an electricity grid, but when there is a natural disaster, then you compound it with this. That will create a lot of problem. Let's say there is an earthquake and people are looking around, and suddenly you go and target the energy, and that is going to be a serious issue. US weather satellites, this is one that was reported in November. What it does is it critically hampers all your disaster management planning, aviation, shipping, and other crucial issues. So again, it might not be a standalone one. It can be used at the appropriate time, and we call it sometimes like an hybrid war. You just wait for the right opportunity to come. Now, is this new? No. In our research, we find that in 1972, there's something called the Farewell dossier, which the CIA used. They sold US flawed chips and software, resulting in 3 kiloton explosion in the Trans-Siberian pipeline. So which means this is not something new. This has been happening for the last 60, 70 years that we know of. Okay. Again, I came to the center, which is SCADA, which most of us know. The problem is there is going to be a huge reliance on the SCADA ecosystem because of the pressure to adopt new technology. So where's the problem of SCADA? It is in this. The attitude, we will ship it today by most companies and we will get it right by version number 3. So that gap is where you have the threat. This is the ecosystem. So you have 3 key stakeholders. One is your manufacturer. For him, it's the economic reward, so he's not too concerned about security. The user, unfortunately, doesn't know much about security because he's just using it, and for him, price is very important. On the other vector, the third, on the tripod, you have the researcher or the criminal or the hacker who's really spending time on finding out where the vulnerability is. And today, it's so easy to identify an attack. You have tools available on the net, Shodan and Metasploit. Most of us know what it can do. You can identify all the ports and you can attack it also. And this is, this is how it looks if you use one of these tools. And I have one slide which is also a future threat which says dogs can bark and dogs that bite. And it was one of the former heads, somebody who we work with, said that we have sold our soul to the internet. Okay, and this is irreversible now. Terrorists use these sort of websites to get into the system. In one of the website tools they're using is the Ghost Caliphate. So far it has not become real, but we just cannot say that this will not happen. Just imagine this. Most of us do banking, and you do banking, it's all online. You have, let's say, 1 million, 10 million in your account. But today, you have nothing physical to verify. You don't even know where your bank is. All you have is your system. What happens one day, it just goes blank. Because today, the whole thing, the whole edifice of what we are doing is built on these three things. Look, all the aircrafts flying, 100,000 of them flying all over the place. Just imagine one day is just shut off. Possible. The challenge is between these three: the cost, the arbitrage, and the complexity. But in this strategy, we should always remember this. Do we build military capability based on how much money we can save? And there is definitely a paradigm shift in what we are doing between risk management and maintaining mission effectiveness. We believe that cyber is not a technology problem. From most of our research, we find that the maximum surface area of networks in a cyber thinking process is not more than 16 to 18%, which means more than 80% lie outside the network, which is your human intelligence, your counterintelligence, your technical intelligence, your web intelligence, you name it, we have just put it there. Okay? And which means that typically IT managers cannot sort this problem. You really need people from a military background to understand security, because IT managers have no comprehension of what security is. A sort of a research that we said, there is a technology that people are trying to develop called talent, which basically is a shifting. It basically changes randomly between, and sort of creates a moving target. One of the things that we look at is actionable threat intelligence and strategic organizational approach. This is what I wanted to flag. Look at all these cables. All you need, and if you look at these cables, each cable is hardly so thick. All you need is a frogman just to jump where the cables come up and just intercept it. You really don't even need to go through the net. You just have to use a fishing trawler to get into these cables. This is how the cables look. And no protection. We have gone physically and verified in at least 8 ports. No protection. Look at the government, and this is the last, and I will conclude. So, as cyber threats evolve, what would happen is citizens would say that, this is something we don't know, so we need governments to come in and help more and more. So governments will end up investing a lot more money on these technologies. One cause could be that, you will have less freedom to operate. Leave that aside. But what's the other? The cyber criminals are specialists. They, without having to invest money in developing this, they will know how to reverse engineer it. And this will create further asymmetry, because you will have a reverse engineered product going against the industry, and they have no capability. Thank you very much.